Hello again.
That was seamless.
It was.
Yeah.
It was almost like we haven't been away.
It was almost like that. Wink.
Yeah, what a Christmas. Yes. Yeah, well, obviously it's not Christmas. It's
Shall I pretend that my sore throat has gone away?
Yeah.
Okay.
Miraculously better. It's not really still
Not
the
really
20th.
better, is it?
Actually, is it the 20th? I can't remember what date it is.
I can't. Let's just pretend. Anyway,
Whatever.
so we're back.
We're back, and more importantly, this is our end of the year roundup where we do our little awards thing, which obviously people are waiting. There's artists all over the world thinking, oh, I hope we get a CTTB Music Podcast Award. I know Fred Durst is still got his perched high.
I'm sure he has. And his award.
Indeed. So, 2013. It's been interesting, 2013. And given we've spent the last two end-of-year podcasts pretty much...
What, moaning?
Yeah, moaning. Exactly, moaning about the lack of quality in the year's releases.
Yeah.
It does come as a rather pleasant surprise and a pleasant change this year to say that it's actually been a rather fine year musically. And so much so as will be made clear as we go through this podcast, that it's actually proved difficult for us to actually therefore make decisions on some things because there's actually been so many good records come out this year.
Yeah.
And the fact that we both had problems coming up with our top 20 albums and even our top 5s in particular, and with much changing over the last couple of weeks. But we'll get to that shortly. And this is a year which began with Adamant album.
Oh,
really?
I remember that.
Yeah.
Never got that T-shirt made, did I?
No.
No.
And then we also discovered a Mello and Nick Cave.
Oh, yes.
And then, of course, we had the big surprise of the year, which was the unexpected return of Mr. Bowie.
Well, that just blew us all away, didn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And in our digital age, the fact that not only the album's release was secret, but the fact that he'd even been working on an album was seemingly kept secret was still quite astonishing, really.
Yeah.
The added bonus was when the album actually arrived. Turned out to be pretty good.
It turned out to be a really good album.
Yeah. Conversely, we had artists such as Phoenix and Yeah releasing albums that were not as good as their previous efforts.
No.
We had Depeche Mode showing they were still, Depeche Mode.
Yeah.
Then we came across a bloke called John Grant,
Oh.
who we hadn't really heard of before.
More on that later.
Yeah. Tickled our fancy. And then also, at the start of the year, we also found ourselves in the country. Steve Earle was back with another album, and then we had newcomer Casey Musgraves, who would be followed up later on in the year, just a few months ago, by Brandy Clark. As summer approached, obviously, Daft Punk were in town and released what was pretty much the perfect album for what turned out to be a really nice summer in London.
It did.
Weather-wise, lots of sun, their mix of disco and 70s rock influences
melding
melding to great effect, indeed. Elsewhere, heavy metal gods Black Sabbath were back, and surprisingly came back with a pretty decent album as well, 13. And as winter approached, Sting released his first album of new material in a decade, and much to both our surprises, it also actually wasn't that bad.
I'm still shocked by my reaction to that.
And back to, of course, were the critics' darlings Arcade Fire, with an album that was disappointing.
Very long.
Yes. So,
Again, more on that later.
indeed.
Yes.
So we
This is not all
reviewed,
bad news.
we reviewed 66 albums
Good
this year,
Really?
which
Is
is
that something
quite
of a
shocking.
record?
It may well be.
Yeah.
So a good stint from us, and like I said, I think both of us found that surprisingly, you could probably say about a third of those albums were actually pretty darn good.
Yeah. I think anything that scores. I mean, we didn't do a top 25, but anything, I'd say about half of those albums could have easily scored in a top 25 without much of a placing between them.
Indeed.
Yeah.
So for a bit of fun, before we get on to our main review, taking those 66 albums, I've looked over 25 magazine and online best of year lists to see what they would come to as the top 15 albums from the ones that we reviewed. So I looked at what marks they gave them, if they included them at all, blah blah blah. And if we were going by what the experts say on our 66 albums, our top 15 would be as follows: 15, The Civil Wars. 14, The Pet Shop Boys Electric. 13, Nine Inch Nails Hesitation Marks. 12, Matthew E. White Big Inner.
Mm-hmm.
11, Casey Musgraves, Same Trailer, Different Park.
Okay.
10, John Grant, Pale Green Ghosts.
Yep.
9, Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds, Push Away the Sky. 8, Lord. I must stop calling her Lordy, which I did throughout the whole podcast.
You did throughout that podcast. I
Pure
kept telling you
heroin,
it was
I
Lord.
know. 7, David Bowie, The Next Day.
Hooray!
6, Queens of the Stone Age, Like Clockwork. 5, The Arctic Monkeys, AM. 4, Disclosure, Settle. More about that later. 3, Daft Punk, Random Access Memory. 2, Arcade Fire, Reflector. So regardless of what was the presumed negative response to the album, still high up. And number 1 would have been Haim, Days Are Gone, which pretty much featured in every top 50. Sometimes it was quite low down, sometimes it was high up, but it was the most consistent performer of any album in the best of lists this year. So we shall see later on whether that reflects our own choices. But before we get to that, let's get on to some awarding.
Oh, let's get to the fun stuff.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Right.
And our number 1.
It says shuffling paper.
Yes.
Well, our first award is the best. This year, we rediscovered our love of banjos, but we never expected to fall in love with country award.
Indeed. And why was that?
That's because, you've mentioned Steve Earle. So
I have mentioned
honorary mention to Steve Earle, but there were 2 ladies in particular that captured our country hearts.
They did indeed.
And a little did we know, or little did I know, that actually their 2 records were related.
Indeed.
And those 2 ladies were Casey Musgraves and Brandy Clark.
Yeah, and it was a pleasant surprise. I mean, obviously, me more than you, I've always had quite a liking for country music and modern country music, but even taking that into consideration, it was particularly when the Musgraves album came out at the start of the year. It was a real surprise, considering this is somebody that is been touted as new Taylor Swift almost, I suppose, by some people.
Is she?
Yeah.
No.
Although thankfully, for the moment at least, she's eschewing going to pop. But who knows if that will change in the future. But I think for me, and I think what's appealed to us both about these artists, and actually I think it's a theme that runs through our whole year, was actually just how good the quality of the songwriting was and the lyrical content of both these records.
Yeah.
Both managed to create believable stories about believable people whilst injecting humour into the mix.
Yeah.
And created. It's just both albums are just full of great tunes.
Yes.
It's that kind of thing. You think, actually, that's a great tune. Next track, that's a great tune. And you're not thinking, oh, that's a bit filler. That's obviously the hit single.
Yes.
Blah blah blah.
Yeah.
They are actually great songs.
Yeah.
And I certainly hope that this is the start of big things for both these women rather than the end of big things for them.
Well, I really hope so, particularly for Casey, who's obviously got, many years in the industry ahead of her.
Yes. But if you had to pick one?
Casey.
Ditto. Our first winner!
But of course I picked Casey knowing that Brandy Clark's on there.
Indeed. So next up is our best and worst gig, and we actually, surprisingly, I think we only managed to make it to 4 collective gigs.
Well, I substituted you for my brother-in-law on one of those gigs.
You did, yes. And I think
it was Joe Pug, wasn't it?
Yes, and I think there was at least one other gig that you were meant to come to, and I substituted. I think I substituted just nobody. I had one of those Johnny No Mates times when I tried to replace you with several people, and you're irreplaceable. You see,
I'm irreplaceable. Yourself, anyway.
So the ones we did make it to were Dutch Uncles, John Grant, Casey Musgraves, and Summer Camp. So the question is, I think we both know which was the worst gig of those 3.
Yeah, we do. And I don't really want to go into the reasons why, or sort of overanalyse why this might have been the case. But the Dutch Uncles gig was disappointing. Yeah,
they were quite dull.
Yeah, they didn't really, and I know that probably not having a stage presence is probably their stage presence. And certainly, you still got that cough. And certainly the approach that they took on stage around the various instruments, they were interesting to watch. But you're kind of like, what am I watching here? And having actually ranked their album in my own top 20,
Spoiler alert.
Spoiler alert. It was a bit of a disappointing gig.
It was, yeah. I remember we both were quite looking forward to it. We both, particularly of the albums that came out at the start of the year, it was one of the better records that came out at the start of the year. We thought it was interesting, had that kind of 80s vibe going on, but in a kind of good way, kind of taking it and using it and making it sound current rather than just being a pastiche.
Yeah.
But yeah, the actual gig itself was one of those ones, and we were both kind of standing there, kind of going, yeah.
Whereas the other 3 gigs were awesome.
Yes, and I would say much harder to pick a winner from.
Yeah, absolutely.
2 of them were at Shepherd's Bush, which was a venue I seem to spend a lot of time at this year, bizarrely. It seems to be most of my gigs I went to were at Shepherd's Bush this year, which were the John Grant and Casey Musgraves. And Summer Camp, which is the most recent one we went to, was at Heaven.
Yeah.
We were camp at Heaven.
We were. Yeah, indeed. I don't know.
They're very different, that's the thing, isn't it?
They are very different because with anyone that knows that London and knows the venues, Heaven is obviously just all on one level, and it's a club with a stage at the end.
Yes.
So it's a bit of a different crowd, and I don't know if that detracts, but everyone's on the same level, so you get a good view of the band and stuff. And it's not the largest venue for a band.
No.
Whereas Shepherd's Bush, it depends where you are. I think with Shepherd's Bush, I always think if you're on the ground floor in the stalls. There's always a bit more of an atmosphere. Mind you, for the John Grant gig,
we were up in the Gods
somewhere,
but standing.
But actually, we were standing at the back, and I can't sort of separate that from the other gig. We certainly had a good view of the stage, and I felt the environment of the gig.
Yeah.
So rather than review the venues, which is what I feel I'm doing, I'm going to pick a winner. It's very hard.
Yeah, I'm leaning slightly towards John Grant, but it's very close for me because there wasn't much to give them. They're both very different. They're both very different. All 3 of them are very very different, and they all were very pleasurable and all actually based on the 3 albums that these artists released this year. The gigs lived up to the promise of the records as well.
Yes. I'm leaning towards Casey Musgraves because again, actually no, both her and John Grant had quite a fair bit of banter with the crowd.
Yes,
as well. And John Grant told a very amusing story. In fact, he told several.
Yes, he did.
Stories.
None of which would be repeatable on a family podcast.
None of which are repeatable in any form of media. But I'm leaning towards Casey Musgraves, so I think that's a tie.
It is a tie.
Yeah.
Moving on. Best Song of the Year, because 2013 was Awesome for Music Award.
It certainly was.
And this is another prime example of us attempting to come up with top 10 lists of the best songs of the year, which mine would probably change as I'm reading it again now, frankly, because you know. I mean, as you see, I even put spares in for mine because I was thinking, was that really the best one? I think, oh no, I forgot whatchamacallit. It's like my first time I sent you the list the other day. Like, I thought
God, you actually added to this list.
Yeah, like, I thought I forgot I'm the Wire, and I really love that song. It's brilliant. And I go, oh god.
Yeah.
But rather than changing everything again, I'm quite happy to say that the 10 is it 10 that I've got there?
Yeah, looks like it.
10-ish. that I've got here are as good as tracks that came out this year. So, Churches, which is an album we didn't get around to reviewing, Glasgow band, very much a kind of Yazoo, Eurasia, DM type sound.
Yeah.
Single off that album, Mother We Share, was a brilliant track, although there is another track on the album called Tether that I'm almost tempted to say instead.
Okay.
John Grant, GMF,
Absolutely.
as it's officially titled,
Yeah.
which stands for
Something else.
Greatest Mother
Something.
Farmer.
Yeah.
I'm the Wire, which is a great song. A Surprise.
For you.
Pet Shop Boys Axis, although it is pretty much an instrumental track.
It's an awesome tune.
But it is an awesome tune.
They just came crashing back with that.
Icona Pop, I love it because it is just an infectious pop song.
Yeah.
As written by Charlie XCX, in fact.
Yeah.
Paramore, Slim to You, again, just a great pop tune.
Yeah.
Really like that. Daft Punk. Yeah, it was very.
I'm exactly the same with you. On
it was very tempting to say Get Lucky because Get Lucky. Let's face it. Get Lucky has been the track of the year.
It was the anthem.
It is the one that's won all the awards for track of the year.
Yeah.
However, track Giorgio by Marauder, which is a 9-minute conversation and instrumental track that is on the Daft Punk album, is just genius.
Yeah.
Gaga Applause, as I mentioned in the last podcast when we were talking about the Gaga album, just a brilliant song, up there with the best. Casey Musgrave's Merry Go Round, could have picked any tracks off that album, really.
Could.
Bowie, Heat, which is him doing his kind of Scott Walker impression. It's a really dark and brooding song, not the most obvious thing to pick off the album, but the track I really, really like.
Yeah, sure.
And finally, Roddy Hart, Bright Like Fever. Really like Roddy Hart, and this track's just a kicking tune.
Cool.
As I said, there were other tracks that I could put in, but, you know.
Yeah, I had a few. Should you want me to?
Go on.
Well, a couple you've mentioned already.
Let the listeners know.
Let the listeners know what I thought. I know we've talked much about the Arcade Fire album being too long, but the opening track, Reflector...
It is a good tune.
There's
no denying.
I did find myself afterwards singing it, humming it a lot around the house. Speaking of houses, My House by Casey Musgrave, another storming tune off her album.
Yes, and actually one of the most country tracks on the album.
Exactly. But it just had that... I think it had encapsulated what I loved about that album, because it's just a happy-go-lucky, I'll get up and go tune. Bowie, The Stars Are Out Tonight. It was either that or the next day for me, but there you go.
I was tempted with the next day as well, as we said.
Nin, Nine Inch Nails, Everything.
Rick Springfield song.
Yes. You know, what would happen if Joy Division sounded happy?
Yes.
Or interestingly, I'd go with the Todd Rundgren remix of All Time Low,
which is also very good.
And you mentioned Axis from the Pet Shop Boys. I would also highlight Inside a Dream. It just encapsulated the spirit of the album with a banging reference to the 1980s, slap bang in the middle, without sounding retrospective at all.
Yeah.
Depeche Mode was an odd one. Secret to the End is track 4, and for a long time I knew it was track 4 because I couldn't remember the title. Should have been you.
But that's what happens when you're digital world. You just don't know the names of things.
But exactly. But it just reminded me so much of their history in that beautiful synth riff that was going through it. I'll speed up now. Daft Punk, Get Lucky. Summer Camp, Pink Summer. Their closing track from their album.
Cracking crack.
It's not how much you love, it's how much you are loved. It's a beautiful moment. Actually, I'm just going to get emotional now. Lassac versus Pip. Their album we'll come to, I suppose, but there were a couple of standout tracks. It was Gold Teeth and this, You Will See Me.
Yes, Gold Teeth would have been my choice if I'd have been picking Lassac versus Pip.
Yeah, obviously, I think that's the one to pick. But You Will See Me just added something dark, which just sent a chill down my spine, which was brilliant. And an album we didn't review was the official soundtrack to Man of Steel by Hans Zimmer. How do you reinvent the superhero theme tune? Because despite the plethora of superhero movies in the cinemas this decade, I don't think anyone's come up with a good banging tune yet. This is close, not like the 70s, you know?
Yes. With
the classic Superman and Star Wars and all those classic movie themes. This is close. What will you do when you're not saving the world, which is the closing track. From both film and album. An album was possibly better than film too. So there you go.
So basically, we have 3 in common essentially. We essentially have Daft Punk, PSB, and John Grant in common on that. If I was picking the one I've listened to the most out of those, it's probably the John Grant track.
Yeah, likewise. Okay, let's go with that. Go, done.
Track of the year, John Grant,
John
GMF.
Grant. Woo!
Not to be confused with the MF.
Not to be confused with... Yeah, anyway.
Yeah. This one should be quick. Best BBC nominated breakout act of 2013. Obviously, at the start of the year, we always go through these things. And this year we had Luna George, Laura Mvula, Churches, Angel Hayes. What happened to Angel Hayes? She just appeared somewhere.
Yeah.
And their number 1 pick, which was Haim, and that was a very good pick, really.
Yeah. Was that their number 1 pick?
Yeah.
Oh, they were bang on the money with that, weren't they?
They were bang on the money with that, yeah. Most of the critics are agreeing with them. If you just and it's hard to argue. They released an album of really entertaining, Fleetwood Mac tinged pop.
Yeah.
I will come back to Churches perhaps a bit later on, but also Laura Mvula was a hugely pleasant surprise at the start of the year. Woman with a great voice and an album that was genuinely different from most of the other records that came out this year.
Yeah. Yes.
But it's got to be Haim.
It's got to be Haim.
Haim.
It's Haim, isn't it?
Haim, yeah.
Haim. Yeah, it's got to be Haim, I think. Although Laura Mvula would get a second mention from me.
Indeed.
Just for being different and being out there. And being a beautiful voice.
Stunning voice.
Yeah.
Next up, my favourite award.
It's the best reference to Todd 2013. Bing! And the winner is Scott Award.
Which obviously the winner should be me award because this was because this was the year I got to meet the man himself. Yeah, exactly. After all, so
I think you are the best reference to Todd this year.
Yes,
we even
indeed.
had a picky of you on the Twitter feed.
Indeed, a picture with me and Todd.
Yeah, exactly.
However,
there's no contest.
However, if we weren't going to do that.
Oh, okay.
Then we have two musical contenders.
Yeah.
The aforementioned
silver medal, folks.
Yeah. The aforementioned Mr. Resner.
Yeah.
Who, as you said, chose to get Todd to remix one of the tracks off his album.
Yeah.
And also the aforementioned, when I was talking about the I Love It single, Charlie XCX, or however I should pronounce his name, who released a single which hugely sampled Todd's song called So Far Away, which in a very interesting way. But, you know, stretch across the sky. The fact that Todd decided to add some extra Todd to Trent's remix
I think that's
was
quite
funny.
I think, you know what, a remix, I always like a remix. I know you have a different opinion on remixes. I always like a remix because I always think it draws out a particular element of the song. But rarely is a remix actually better than the original. And I think the Todd Rundgren remix of All Time Low from the album Hesitation Marks by Nine Inch Nails is a contender for, well, I just had it in my list of songs for the year. So, you know, it's a contender. So I think it's that. I think it's that song.
Congratulations, Trent.
Or Todd. Ping. See you next year, Todd.
Yeah. Moving swiftly on to the one of the most important awards, the classic Gone Cobra Award for Worst Album of the Year. Now, this is a standard.
How many years have we been in this? Is this?
Oh, I don't know, but it's a standard set quite high by Fred Durst and his bunch a few years ago.
Yeah.
Who released an album called Gone Cobra that was
the worst album I think we've ever reviewed.
It was quite bad.
3 or 4 years. Of doing it.
As a result, this year picking albums to be in this
was
actually quite difficult.
Hard.
Thankfully, the Christmas show arrived.
Yeah.
Which could have thrown up pretty much all the albums in the Christmas show, apart from the Robbie Williams album. Apart from that Backstreet Boys album, which we listened to earlier on in the year, was also a bit meh.
Yeah, that was a bit meh.
And I'm perhaps being unfair here because it features in lots of lists, and you definitely liked it more than I did. But the Disclosure album, Settle, was also something that didn't settle with me.
I need to go back and listen to that album again because I think we missed something there. I think maybe you missed something.
Well, according to the critics, we definitely did.
It's one of Trent Reznor's favourite albums of the year.
It's one of lots of people's favourite albums of the year, apparently. But
you know, it's brilliant. You know.
Yeah, I listened to the start of it again the other week. And I
Did you?
Nah, still nothing.
I'm going to go back and re-listen to that. It's been a very difficult year to do this.
Yeah.
In the same way, it's been a difficult year to actually pick a list of 10 when we've ended up with about 20 or 30 brilliant albums. It's very difficult to sort of say, well, this is the worst album, blah, 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 blah. I always feel perhaps with the Christmas releases, it's a bit unfair to pick on them because they're never that great anyway.
No.
You know, although the Mary J. Blige album really possibly was one of the worst things I had to sit through this year.
Yeah. More Bilge than Blige.
And let's say the Bilge. And the same goes for Gary Barlow. Sorry.
So Backstreet Boys.
So it's Backstreet Boys by default, really, isn't it? Yeah.
Backstreet Boys.
That wasn't a great comeback, was it?
No, it wasn't.
No, I remember saying at the time
it had a really good opening. Had a really good lead single.
Really good lead and a really good opening, but you just felt if they'd gone a little bit down the Take That route, there would have been more there.
Yeah.
Yeah. No. So should we go with that?
We should go with that.
Okay. Sorry,
It's the Backstreet Boys.
Backstreet's not back. All right.
All right. We're getting closer to the all-important bit, but before we get to that, a couple of things to do first. First, best album we didn't review or overlooked this year. I don't know if you had any albums that you listened to that we didn't review that we perhaps should have done, or maybe should have got round to, that were interesting in any way, shape or form.
I know a couple of people have mentioned the Placebo album recently. We'll get round to that in the new year.
Yes, we are going to do that in the new year. In fact, in the new year we may actually do a couple of the albums that were quite big in some of the lists that we totally ignored.
Yeah.
So maybe Kanye as well.
Kanye's the one that keeps coming up.
Yeah, and a few others. So maybe as well as doing the BBC nominated Breakout Acts of 2014, we'll also throw in a few of the albums that people were talking about.
2013 was so awesome.
Yes,
we
want to hold on to it.
We want to hold on to it. And I hope that 2014 is just as good. The Eels we missed.
Yeah, that was the start of the year. And that was terrible because I would have liked us to review that. That was quite a good record.
I'd have liked us to have done that as well. Having had the last 2 or 3 records, it was a very nice thing there. But then again, we'd have just been in our comfort zone. So
this is true.
I could probably like it.
Yeah, and for me, I really like the Duckworth Lewis Method's second album, Sticky Wicket.
Yeah.
For to release a second album of cricket themed songs, and for them to be good and entertaining, was frankly genius.
Yeah,
and it's a really, really entertaining record that makes you smile.
I was quite shocked when that popped up. I'm like, really?
It's just
go away with it again.
It's just a great record. And the Church's album, The Bones of What You Believe. If I was including albums outside of the ones we reviewed, would be a contender for a top 5 place for me. It's a really, really great album. Which, considering I think I kind of quite dismissed them at the start of the year when we were looking at them as a nominated breakout act, came as a bit of a surprise to me. Yeah. But really good record. And also I'd like to mention Empirical, Tabula Rasa. This is a jazz record, kind of thing that should have been on the Mercury Music shortlist when, it's a typical thing when Mercury always throw in a jazz record. This year they didn't, for some reason.
Well, that should have been it.
This should have been the jazz album they had on. Really good record of modern jazz, but yeah, really good.
Good.
So it gets to the key bit of what our albums of the year was. But before we do that, we should perhaps... I asked some of our listeners. There are some. There's more than one, honest. Well, now there's more than one. I got the views of 7 of our listeners.
All right.
To ask them what their top 5 albums of the year were.
Like a focus group?
It was a bit.
No.
To ask them what the top 5 albums of the year were.
Yeah.
They came back with 26 different records.
Good grief.
So there was quite a lot of
focus group.
Yeah. However, from that, we still get a top 5 that features 8 people.
Indecisiveness is never our thing, really, is it?
No. So joint 5th are The Civil Wars, The National, Trouble Will Find Me, which is another album that was well received.
That's an album we missed.
Yeah. Franz Ferdinand, Right Thoughts, Right Words, Right Actions.
I'm not sure if that's an album we missed.
Well, a couple of people definitely think we did.
Okay.
Casey Musgrave's Same Trailer, Different Park, also at number 5.
Yeah.
At number 4, the aforementioned Placebo album, Loud Like Love.
Okay.
Number 3, The Leisure Society, Alone Aboard the Ark.
Yes.
Number 2, Mr. Bowie, with The Next Day.
It's not just you, me and every other critic then.
No. And the overwhelming winner, it has to be said, amongst our 7 listeners, was the Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds album's Push Away the Sky.
Okay.
Which was the choice of our listeners.
Really? Wow.
So the question is,
okay,
do we agree?
Do we? Well, here we go. Da-da-da.
Do you want to run through your top 20?
Okay, I'm going to do it really quickly, because a list is a list, right?
Yeah, a list is a list. Yeah.
Okay.
Although I can put some music on in the background, it'll be fine.
Do. Oh, ba 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 la la la.
So Margarita, more like the Margarita Prakatan. A cultural reference that about one person will probably get.
Brilliant. I know Clive James does listen. Right, 20, Dutch Uncles, Out of Touch in the World. 19. This one surprised me. Perhaps I should have knocked it out. Will I Am. Hashtag willpower.
Yes.
It is guilty pleasure. Guilty pleasure. Okay. 18. The Villagers, Awayland. 17. Laura and Foolish, Sing to the Moon. 16. The Civil Wars, The Civil Wars. 15. This surprised me. Sting. What? Sting?
And the last ship sails.
Exactly. Surprised me. But I actually found that album a great deal of fun, and I kept thinking about it.
It is actually a good record.
And it just sort of rested in my subconscious. I hate Sting. No, I don't hate Sting. That's a wrong word. That's a strong word. I've never liked Sting. Okay, it's different to hate.
Yes.
Okay. Anyway, move on. 14. This will shock the critics. Arcade Fire, Reflector. It's just too damn long, but it actually has some really good stuff in it.
It does have some really good
And
stuff
if
in
they'd stuck with the whole disco thing, oh, they started on that again. Haim, Days Are Gone. It could have been higher actually. In fact, anything from here on upwards could have been higher. 9 Inch Nails, Hesitation Marks, except perhaps that. Daft Punk, Random Access Memories. At 10, Arctic Monkeys, AM. At 9, Brandy Clark, 12 Stories. At 8, and possibly could have been higher because I listened to it on the way over here. Rizzle Kicks, Roaring Twenties.
First half of the album, good.
Yes. At 7, Down the Sack versus Scroobius Pick, Repent, Replenish and Repeat. I am actually still listening to it. I know you're not.
Yes.
At 6, Depeche Mode, Delta Machine. Ended higher than I thought it might. At 5, well, 5, 4, 3 and 2 could all be in the same place. At 5, it's David Bowie. Or David Bowie. And it's The Next Day. At 4, it's Summer Camp with Summer Camp. At 3, it is the Pet Shop Boys with Electric. An awesome comeback after leaving their rival. And at 2, it's Casey Musgraves. Same trailer, different park.
So your number one choice
is John Grant, Pale Green Ghosts. That is an album that just blew my socks off for reasons I still don't quite understand.
Indeed. We may speak about that again in a second. So, my top 20. Joint 20th. Todd Rundgren State. I couldn't do it. I had to put him in there.
You had to get him in.
Along with Pet Shop Boys Electric.
Oh, that does surprise me.
Number 19, Black Sabbath Night. 13. 18, Depeche Mode, Delta Machine. 13, Laura Mvula, Sing to the Moon. 16, The Arctic Monkeys, AM. 15, Queens of the Stone Age, Like Clockwork. 14, Roddy Hart and the Lonesome Fire. 13, Steve Earle and the Dukes and the Duchesses, Low Highway. 12, The Civil Wars. 11, Haim, Days Are Gone. 10, Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds, Push Away the Sky. 9, Daft Punk, Random Access Memories. 8, Brandy Clark, 12 Stories. 7, The Joy Formidable, Wolf's Law, which is an album I really loved at the start of the year, still play it quite a lot. 6, The Leisure Society, Alone Aboard the Ark. 5, this is where our lists get somewhat similar, Summer Camp. 4, Speedy Ortez, Major Arcana. 3, Casey Musgraves, Same Trailer, Different Park. 2, John Grant, Pale Green Ghosts. And therefore my number 1 was The Return of the Thin White Duke with The Next Day.
It wasn't David Bowie, was it?
Someone that looked similar to him.
David Bowie!
So that's what we had.
It was awesome when he came back, by the way.
It was.
Because I never thought we'd be sat here reviewing one of his albums. In fact, I think we joked in previous years that it would never happen.
We certainly did.
Yeah.
So, what things people are probably wondering, and we'll discuss a couple of these briefly now. If we combine our views, we do come to CTT Music Top 10 Albums of 2013.
I've never been this methodical before.
I know, it's terrible, isn't it? So, if we did,
okay.
our joint top 10 artists would be Speedy Ortez, Major Arcana, and the Arcade Monkeys, AM. This is an album that got...
You mean the Arctic Monkeys as opposed to the...
Okay, yeah, well... I'm already forming supergroups.
The Arcade Monkeys.
Yes.
Or the Arctic Fire.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
Can I just remember, if that happens, you heard it here first.
It was here first.
Yeah, this is what... It's quite interesting. This album, I think this album for me and the Queens of the Stone Age album, both very, very similar records.
Well, they're the same side of the same coin.
They're the same band, really, aren't they?
Yeah, they are.
But both good records. AM was a good record. It's a grower.
It's a grower.
It
is a grower.
Well. Yeah.
Go back and listen to it again, folks.
Depeche Mode, Delta Machine, and Haim, Days Are Gone are our joint number 8. We spoke about the Haim album several times.
Yeah.
As I say, it's just a really great pop record.
It is.
It's one of those records that has got so much kind of plaudits that you're kind of looking for excuses to hate it in some ways. Yeah. But it is just a really good record. Depeche Mode album, solid, but above solid.
It was above solid, but it was solid.
Yeah.
I've been refraining from saying that all year. It had. I thought it was better than the last album.
It certainly was.
It was more accessible than the last album was. I still think Playing the Angel is their sort of last decade or so peak. But
yes,
yeah,
I agree.
But anyway,
number 7, the Pet Shop Boys, Electric.
Yes.
Having featured in both of our lists.
What an absolutely awesome record that is, though. It is just 9 tracks of pure electronic dance music done well. What more do you want? It's better than Daft Punk's album. Not according to this list, but
no, not according to me either. But there you go. Funny enough, number 6, Daft Punk. See, this.
All right, okay. I'll take a hit.
Apart from a couple of tracks, this is a surprisingly varied and just joyous record to listen to.
It is a joyous record to listen to. It was the soundtrack to the summer. There is so much good stuff on there that we haven't mentioned. Like the Danes of Love, we're talking about
yes,
that one, and some of the other chic instrumental. No. In all seriousness, this was a stormer of an album, and it was an event as well, a bit like the Barry album, but with more publicity before.
Yes, ever so slightly, but not as much publicity as the Arcade Fire album.
No,
as mentioned by Trent Reznor.
Yes, indeed.
Number 5. Brandy Clark, 12 Stories.
Yeah.
The first of our country people. And this is impressive because this is an album that we only reviewed...
podcast before last.
Yeah, a couple of months ago.
Yeah.
But again, it was one of those ones, like the Casey Musgraves album, that basically hit us both on the quality of the songwriting.
Well, in many ways, this might sound crass, the Casey Musgraves and the Brandy Clark are the Red album and the Blue album of country for me this year.
I like it.
Yeah. So Brandy's blue, obviously.
Well, yes.
Yes.
Number 4, and this was a surprise as well, because when we reviewed this album, I was slightly more positive than you were. We were both positive about it.
Yeah.
But I think if you'd have asked both of us at that point, which is again only probably about 3 podcasts ago, if we'd have had it in our top 5, we'd have probably laughed.
Yeah, I'd agree with you there. But then something magical happened.
Yeah, again, it's one of those albums. It just gets under your skin.
It just gets under your skin. It's an absolutely delightful record, Summer Camp. It really is, and I'm so pleased to hear that they're doing the soundtrack to a movie next year, and we're going to have that whole 80s high school thing. Yes, everywhere. And
it's just a good pure pop record, dance record as well. Yes. And it's a dance record that has songs rather than just noodling sounds.
And you can listen to it. That my issue with my issue with Daft Punk is at times it does noodle, and vocoder. But I'm not going to disagree with the combined chart. Obviously, the Pet Shop Boys record is better.
So our top 3: David Bowie, number 3, The Next Day.
Awesome.
It is. It is.
To live to see such days.
To come. I don't believe you just said that.
No, come on. Nobody expected that.
No, nobody expected it. And 2 things. Nobody expected it, and nobody genuinely expected it to come back with an album, and to come back with an album that certainly, for most people, would rank with Heathen as his best work in the last kind of 20, maybe even 30 years for some people.
Maybe, for some people, yeah.
For those people that ignore the first Tin Machine album.
That's a high five.
And outside.
And outside.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because there's some strange people who don't like that album either. They're mistaken.
They're
clearly
mistaken.
Yeah, yes. But So
this was like a greatest hits record.
It was, yes. It was like here's a bit of me from the 80s, here's a bit of me from the 70s, here's a little bit of me from the 90s. Yeah. But I'm reinterpreting it so it still sounds like it's now.
But this is me in 2013. Hello, my name's David Bowie.
Yeah, I'm having a sly wink at myself.
Yeah.
Rather than...
It was... you know, it was just a magical moment when that happened. It really was.
Yeah, and it's just like I said, for me, it was my choice of our album of the year because it is just as much as I tried to have it not my album of the year. I kept coming back playing it, thinking it's just so bloody good.
I forced it down at 5, but my enthusiasm was probably from 2 downwards. You know.
So number 2, Casey Musgraves, same trailer, different park. We've waxed lyrical so much about this album.
I don't know where it comes from. It's changed. You know, it's very rare that you get an album that actually changes your taste in music.
Yeah.
You know, I don't like country and western. I love this album.
I don't think there's much western in this. To be
no, I suppose not. But I don't like country. But I love this album.
Yeah, it's
just awesome.
Great. As I said, it comes down to great songwriting.
Yeah.
Great storytelling.
Yeah.
And as we found out live, a very likeable and personable performer.
Yeah, absolutely. It's one of those life affirming. This is why we love music. You know, it's these moments, these life affirming moments.
Well, yeah, and I think that pretty much rings even truer, I suppose, with our combined number 1, which was John Grant, Pale Green Ghosts.
Yeah.
And another example of one of the reasons we, apart from our own amusement, obviously, one of the reasons we do this and started doing this, and why we try, as well as trying to review the latest big albums that come out, try to dig around and try and find interesting records that have been released that we know nothing about, is for these exact kind of moments when you kind of think, John Grant, yes, I've seen the name in the press before, but not really kind of listened to any of his music. And we both had the same response when we were reviewing this album way back when, at the start of the year. It's one of the things you put on and you kind of think, oh, strange electronica thing going on. Yeah, weird. And then it just grabs you.
Yeah.
And again, it's just brilliant lyricism.
Yeah.
Funny.
Yeah.
And heartfelt. This is a man who's basically kind of put all his angst of a relationship going tits up, as well as discovering these HIV positive and various other things, into the writing of one album, and it's genuinely a beautiful record.
It is a beautiful record, and it was a record I didn't listen. I really enjoyed it when we listened to it. I thought that's a special record. As is the nature of the way we do this, you then have to move on and listen to the next 6 records that we have to listen to, and then you find yourself a couple of months later humming along to a tune, and you think, where have I heard that?
Yeah.
And you discover where it was, and you rediscover it again, and you listen to it again, and then you listen to it again, and here we are 9 months later, and I'm still listening to this bloody album. And it's awesome, you know, for all those reasons that you've outlined. He was such a wonderful live. I know I heard on the Casey Musgrave side with the live, but he was such an awesome live act as well.
Yeah, again, very funny, very warm, very self-depreciating.
Yes,
and also we should also give a big kudos because the album also features some really great backing vocals by Sinead O'Connor.
Yes,
who apparently he found joy to work with.
Yeah, so there you
go. So yes, our album of the year is John Grant, Pale Green Ghosts, and a fine
album it is too.
And I have said of our top 10 and in fact both our combined top 20s. I think, as we've said, this has been a fantastic year. If 2014 can be even close, then we're in for a treat.
If 2014 is as close to 2013 in terms of the music that we listen to, then it'll still be a good year.
Yeah,
I'm really worried now.
Anyway, we and of course we hope you'll be listening.
Absolutely.
We'd like to thank all our old listeners and new listeners we've picked up over the last few months.
Yes.
And we hope you'll stick with us, rambling and waffling and talking twaddle.
Yeah, please do.
In 2014.
We appreciate your love and support. Thank you.
Happy New Year. It logs itself off. Perfect timing. You've been listening to the CTTV Music Podcast.